Would you wait 42 minutes on hold for a recruit?
No, I would wait, and for Kobe, I would have hung up, but I would have called back.
That was Fran McCaffery, and this is On the Bench with Mike Hall. That's me. Fran McCaffery grew up a big baseball fan from Philadelphia who loved Mike Schmidt. But you know him as the basketball head coach at Iowa. He took over the Hawkeyes in 2010, and this year's team has the potential to be one of the program's all-time squads. And considering he has two of his sons on the roster, it's certain to be one of the most memorable for him. Fran came to Iowa after dominating as the head man at three previous jobs: Siena, UNC Greensboro, and Lehigh. Before coaching, he played basketball in the Ivy League at Penn. And one of his teammates back then was Kevin Warren, as in Commissioner of the Big Ten, Kevin Warren. Fran is the second winningest head coach in the history of Hawkeye basketball, behind only the great Tom Davis, and Fran's closing in fast. You may have seen him get rather intense on the sidelines sometimes, but away from the game, he is relaxed, down to earth, fun, ready to laugh, and a pretty darn good storyteller. Also, Fran isn't willy-nilly. He's calculated. When you ask him something, he takes his time to think of a good, thoughtful answer. Even when I'm simply trying to get him to laugh. Like on my first question to him for this podcast, which was, how many people have you beat up because they said you have a girl's first name?
Surprisingly, none.
But about to be one.
Yeah, nobody ever. No, remember now in Philadelphia, Mike, there were other Frans that were pretty successful. Franny O'Hanlon, great player at Villanova, terrific coach at Lafayette, and Fran Dunphy, who ended up coaching at my alma mater and did unbelievable things there, and then also at Temple. So, yeah, nobody bothered us too much.
Until me just now.
Yeah, they knew better. Apparently you don't.
What's the story behind it? Did your folks ever tell you what went into choosing that name for you?
I was named after my grandfather.
Ah, that's great.
Yeah.
What did he do?
Well, he was born and lived a good portion of his life in Scotland. So he was sort of a Scottish gentleman. He was the kind of guy that he would wear a tie and during the day and things like that. And he was interesting. When they came over here, my father was actually born over there. He was a baby when they brought him over. So and they moved into Philadelphia, and that's where they raised my father, and that's where we were raised. We lived probably not even a mile away from where they lived, in a neighborhood in Philadelphia. Just a interesting guy, had an assortment of jobs, obviously lived through the Depression. So in those days, Mike, you were happy to have a job.
Right.
And he always had one and always provided. And he died, I guess, when I was in 8th grade, 7th grade, something like that.
Yeah. Have you done the trips over to Scotland before? Have you tried to see where the family roots are ever?
I did. And the reason I did was my wife, she's incredible. For my 50th birthday, she surprised me with a trip to Scotland. And we went to the town where my grandparents lived, a little town called Old Kilpatrick, right on the River Clyde. Just a small little town, not much to it. And that was an amazing trip, Mike. I was really impressed with Edinburgh, with Glasgow. We went to the Isle of Skye. We stayed in castles. I mean, it was a terrific trip. She really planned it incredibly well. It's interesting because her sister was in a play her brother-in-law was in a play with Frances McDormand on Broadway, and they became friendly with her. And unbeknownst to us, she and her husband vacation in Scotland every year. So she basically wrote the itinerary for our trip. We stayed where she said to stay. We ate where she said to eat. And she was really excited to do it. She knows that country inside and out. So we had a fabulous time.
Oh, man. It is so cool when you're over there because in America, like especially like Philadelphia is a great example. You will see a road or a building and you're like, oh, my gosh, this is 260 years old. It's incredible. And then you go to Scotland and they're like, this is 1,200 years old.
Yes. That really hits you. You're right, Mike. And I think a lot of people, that's why they go see the castles, and you can't believe these structures. And then when you're in them, you can't believe that they were built that long ago. Like, how did they do it? It's amazing. It seems like it defies the law of physics, but
yeah,
nonetheless.
Okay, so we know why you're named Fran. Give me the rundown of nicknames you've had in your life.
Well, really, the only one is White Magic, and the reason for that was I played in the Sunny Hill League. My mentor coming up was a black gentleman that said, hey, you got a chance to be pretty good. And my father was smart enough to listen to him because he was a basketball guy. He said, I'm going to take you down to North Philly. We're going to play in the statewide tournament. I was in like 4th grade, 5th grade. And then he said, okay, now I'm going to take you down and you're going to try out there's never been a white player on this one team. You're going to play for them. If you make the team, I went to the tryouts. There was 250 kids trying out. And he said, you're going to get your shot blocked. It's going to be different than anything you've ever seen. He was right. But then he just continued, and he helped me through my high school years. He's going to play in the Sunny Hill League, and then he handled my recruiting and so forth. And so when I was in the league, see, I grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly black. So that's how I played. In those days, the white guys played like they were from the suburbs, and the black guys played like they were from the city. And I lived in the city, and so I used to go behind my back and throw behind the back alley-oop passes and had fun playing that way. But I also played with a guy by the name of Louis Lloyd, who's probably the greatest player ever to play at Drake, one of the best players ever to come out of Philly, played for the Houston Rockets in the '86 finals with the Twin Towers. And he was Black Magic. So he was Black Magic. We were teammates. It was the early stages of AAU. We would travel around, and these were the top players in Philadelphia. And Louis Lloyd and Gene Banks were the two best players we had. I was on that team. And then a sports writer in Philadelphia, a guy named Julius Thompson, gave me that name, and it stuck. So a lot of times I'm at the Final Four, and my wife gets a kick out of it. Coaches that I know, guys from Philly, Magic, what's up? That stuff like that. So that's really the only one.
That's really cool, though, man. And you had this connection going back to 5th grade, but did the nickname not come till high school?
Wasn't until high school.
Okay. Yeah.
It wasn't until high school, and it was because of the way that I played the game down in the city. And some of those guys are still friends till this day. I see them all the time. Jeffrey Clark, for example, is one of the top officials in college basketball. Like, if he ever does one of our games, like, he calls me Magic and I call him Monk, because that was his nickname. So that's just how it was.
I have a long-standing belief that nicknames are so bad now, and they used to be so good 20, 30, 40 years ago. Like, now it's, KD, it's A-Rod. And back then, like, Lenny Dykstra was Nails. Like, Frank Thomas was the Big Hurt. You were Magic. Like, nicknames used to be so awesome back in the day.
Yeah, and sometimes they could be insulting. They were maybe part of a physical attribute that you might have, and nobody was concerned about political correctness. That was your nickname, and it stuck, and didn't make it right, but they always had some significance. And fortunately, in my case, I was glad to be compared to Louis Lloyd.
Right. No, I agree. Sometimes the physical ones are the hardest. Like I was called male model my whole life, and they just everyone would say, hey, there's a male model.
It had to be annoying after a while.
It's just tough. Like, respect me for my brain, Fran, not just my body.
But you got the girl, so that's all that matters.
In my head, I did. Okay, so you get this cool nickname in high school. Then you go to college, and there's a lot we could talk about in college. But I think one of the most fascinating ones is you're a fifth-year senior, and this freshman comes into your program named Kevin Warren, right?
Yes. We hit it off right away. That class was really unique. Incredibly successful group. I came in with a guy by the name of Carver-Hawkeye, who's like the attorney general for the District of Columbia. A talented group. But we had a big junior. I was the only senior. We had a big junior class. So that group kind of had to wait their turn a little bit because that group got all the playing time. But they were enthusiastic and they were great teammates. And, in those days, the Ivy League sent the regular season champion to the NCAA tournament. So you had to win the regular season championship. We started the season 0-2. Usually it's over. We didn't lose again and went to the NCAA tournament. And I still remember how excited we all were. We were the first team in because the others had conference tournaments. We did not. But I loved Kevin and the rest of the group. But the other interesting thing about Kevin and my relationship, we reconnected years later when I got to Notre Dame. When Digger was considering hiring me, I was replacing John Shoemate, who was Kevin's brother-in-law. And Digger actually asked Kevin Warren, what do you think about this guy? He said, I love Fran. We're buddies from back when we played. And Kevin was in law school at Notre Dame at the time. So, my first 2 years at Notre Dame, Kevin was there. And, we would go to functions and see each other all the time. He'd come to practice when he wasn't studying and so forth. He came to all the games. Very close with Coach Phelps, with myself, with the other members of the coaching staff. So when I saw that he was named Big Ten commissioner, I was absolutely thrilled.
Yeah, that must have been incredible. I mean, it's cool when you move on in life and then people you maybe didn't expect all of a sudden do these big things, but it's hard to get much bigger than a Big Ten commissioner.
But I have to tell you, I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, he was destined to be a superstar in whatever he decided to do. And of course, he had a great run in the NFL. I remember him talking to me about, when he first met the woman who's now his wife. He was telling me, hey, I think this is it. And we laughed about that when they came up here to be because they made the run through every team in the conference.
Right.
And, he's just made great decisions. And I always say, if you ever met Kevin Warren's father, you would understand why Kevin Warren is who he is and why he's successful as he is. And I'm thrilled for him. I have to say, I can't imagine walking into a more difficult situation for anybody in charge of anything.
Right.
Than what he has had to deal with these last 6 months. But there's nobody better to handle it than Kevin Warren.
Right. You take not only this huge job and then a once-in-a-century pandemic happens, and you can't fully make the relationships with the people you've wanted to because you can't leave your home. You
can't. And then you factor in the social justice debate. These are just unprecedented times and difficult decisions are having to be made. And every time a decision is made, it's incredibly criticized. No matter what you do or say, it doesn't seem like you can ever be right. And my athletic director is going through the same thing.
Yeah.
Our president is going through the same thing. But these are really smart, great people. And we will get through this because we got the right people in charge.
Let me ask you to tell a story that I've been told you tell better than anyone else. We have a friend, Jess Settles, who is a BTN analyst, was a great Iowa player, was an incredible high school recruit. And I think you were at Notre Dame still at the time this happened, but he tells me this story about an unbelievably famous person. And when I ask him about this, he says, you really have to have Fran tell it because he's better at telling it than I am.
Well, the interesting thing was we were not recruiting Jess because we really didn't know who he was at the time. And he went to the Nike camp. In those days, that was the one where it was a make or break. He was one of the best players there. And Coach McLeod fell in love with him. So I started calling him, and he was interested. It's hard to get those guys out of Iowa.
Right.
And so he visited, and I picked him up at the airport. And he said this to me in the car. He says, Coach, I understand that, these football games at Notre Dame, like a lot of celebrities show up and they come the night before and they go to the pep. We used to get full house in basketball for the pep rallies for the football games. I said, yeah. He said, well, who might come? And I said, well, and this is when Julia Roberts was in her prime. Not that she's still not gorgeous, but,
right.
She was maybe the hottest thing in Hollywood. I said, well, probably Julia Roberts is probably going to be here. He said, no way, Coach. And this is a small-town Iowa kid. And I said, no, I think she might be here. So we go into the pep rally. We had seats set aside, and I look up, and she's about 5 rows behind where we're going to sit. And so Jess sat down, and I said, hey, Jess, turn around over your right shoulder and look who's about 5 rows back. And the funniest thing was, I thought it'd be like, wow. He turned and looked. He immediately got up. He walked right up to her. She's with her boyfriend at the time, Jason Patrick. And he taps her on the leg. He says, hey, I'm Jess. And she's like, I'm Julia. He's like, I know. I just want to come and say hello. And she had a big smile. She was really sweet with him. And I don't think he knew what else to say after that. And he just turned around and walked back and sat back down with the other recruits. And then, of course, we were all high-fiving him and giving him the business. But he had a big grin on his face. We laugh about that all the time. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what's more upsetting, that he didn't seal the deal. I mean, where's the phone number? He can't close.
No, he couldn't close.
Or that you didn't seal the deal. You got Julia Roberts on campus and you didn't get Jess.
Yeah. I always tell him, I said, you know what? I said, Jess, you're the only guy I ever lost that I felt like made a great decision. You were smarter than I thought you were.
Things turned out okay for him.
Yes, they did.
Right.
And then it's really a shame because if he didn't hurt his back, he would have played in the league 15 years.
Right. Well, and he almost played in the Big Ten 15 years.
I think he did. Yeah. I might sub him in.
Someone told, it might have been Jess or maybe it was somebody else. Somebody told me that you had a Kobe story or two, that you maybe got to know Kobe Bryant when he was real young. Is that true?
Well, I knew his dad really well, Joe Jelly Bean. I knew Kobe's grandfather. And then we played for the same AAU team. The gentleman that I was referring to before that kind of handled my career, Sam Rines out of Philly, he was Kobe's AAU coach. Kobe played for him. He did the same for Kobe that he did for me. So we were – I don't think any of us really thought that Kobe was going to go to school, but we thought maybe for 1 year. So, we presented to him and his dad, hey, come to Notre Dame for 1 year. Every game we play is on national TV. We'll center the offense around him, play for an NBA head coach. He's going to go to the NBA in 1 year anyway. And they considered it for a while. And so, I would call Kobe on the phone, and he was great. One night I had – this is funny. One night I had it set up for Coach McLeod to call Kobe. So he calls Kobe. And so the next day I said, hey, Coach, how'd it go? He said, well, he put me on hold for 42 minutes. I said, Coach, did you hang up or did you just stay on the phone? He said, nope. I sat right there. He came back and we finished our conversation.
Holy cow.
Yeah. I said, Coach, that's amazing that you did that. He said, yeah, he said, Coach, hang on a minute. I got to jump. I'll be back. And he came right back 42 minutes later. Yeah.
Would you wait 42 minutes on
Oh.
hold for a recruit?
No, I would wait. And for Kobe, I would have hung up, but I would have called back. But his father is really one of the more delightful guys you'll ever meet. He was an assistant at LaSalle at the time, so there was a lot of pressure on Joe to deliver Kobe to LaSalle. And at that time, LaSalle's still a good program, but in those days, they were a top 25 team out of Atlantic 10. So everybody thought he was going to go there, play 1 year, and then go to the league. But, what used to happen with Kobe is Iverson used to come and pick him up, and Aaron McKee and those guys. And so, like, when he would work out, he wasn't going to Lower Merion High School. He was going to the Sixers training facility, and he was practicing with those guys when he was 17. And I think then he knew, like, okay, I can do this. Like, I know I can do it because I play with these guys every day. And he could. I mean, if you watched him in high school, one of the best high school games I ever saw was Kobe Bryant. I took Coach McLeod, Kobe Bryant versus Rip Hamilton at the Palestra. It was at least one overtime, might have been two. They went at it. They both had high 30s, low 40s, and Kobe's team won at the very end.
Oh, man.
Won the state championship.
That sometimes the concept of recruiting is so amazing to me because people haven't fully developed yet. But like when you're watching a Kobe Bryant, like could you tell like there's something special, there's something different that we don't see every year?
For guys like him, it's easy.
Yeah.
Like I remember we were recruiting a guy who was playing against Jason Kidd in Las Vegas, and I was sitting with Coach McLeod, and he said that guy's wasting his time. Just go right to the league right now. He's ready right now. So this was the summer before Jason Kidd's senior year. Like there's certain players that you watch, like Tracy McGrady. There's certain guys who say, okay, I saw LeBron, and I was actually the legendary story, LeBron versus Lenny Cook, 1-on-1, ABCD camp, Teaneck, New Jersey. I was there. I watched it. And, those guys are just a cut above. Because remember, they're playing against the top 100 players in the country.
Right.
But like you said, some of them are skinny, some of them are younger, some of them are going to develop later. I mean, Luka Garza was at that camp and made the all-star team and was very heavily recruited, but was still a little bit under the radar from what I think he should have been. I don't think a lot of people thought he would be the player of the year. I did. I saw him as a sophomore. I said, this guy is the real deal. And with a guy like him, I felt pretty good about his character and his work ethic, but you never really know until you get him. And when I say nobody's ever worked harder, that's the truth.
Yeah. There's so many different things you have to do as a head coach. Obviously, the X and O's is incredibly important, as is what we're talking about, the recruiting. But you have, especially now, a different dynamic that almost no coaches, historically speaking, have. Very few of them. You coach your sons. Like, I have to think that's a different – obviously, it's a joyful thing and you get to spend so much time. But how often are you in your head about being like, am I being too hard on him because he's my son? Am I not being hard enough on him because he's my son? When it comes to playing time or yelling at practice or anything like that, like how often are you just not living in the moment, but going, wait, I got to wear two hats here, dad and coach to the rest of the team?
I thought a lot about that beforehand. And I guess my best answer to that question is don't overthink it.
Yeah.
The critical thing is to treat them exactly the same as you would treat anybody else on the team, for them and for the other players. They earn their minutes. They're incredibly well liked. These are their buddies. Connor lives with four other guys on the team. Patrick's roommate is Joe Toussaint. They are inseparable. They came in together. They played NBA Top 100 together. And it's really fun to see them develop those kind of relationships, compete on the floor. It was fun to watch Connor last year lead the nation in assist turnover ratio because it didn't start that way. He got sick, he had the red shirt, and then, I thought he was a solid performer for a NCAA tournament team. He was a backup. and he was respected for that and appreciated for that. And then last year he earned a starting spot and, really, I think, improved in a lot of areas. He's a winner. He's smart. He's the guy coming out of a timeout. If anybody's confused about anything that took place during a timeout, he puts his arm around and make sure they're in the right place. Patrick's a completely different kind of player, so I think they can play together. But you're right. You said it from the beginning, Mike. Seeing them every day is what's awesome. I love being able to go in the gym and they're in there with their buddies, playing for the University of Iowa, playing in the Big Ten, growing up watching the Big Ten, hoping that one day they'd be good enough. There's nothing better.
Yeah. Well, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, you got to coach them not just at Iowa, but at AAU. Is that right?
Yeah, when they were in fourth grade.
Baywhack, right.
And who else was on that team was Boo Boo from Northwestern.
Oh, really?
He was on that team, yeah. And we used to practice at Siena. I was the head coach at Siena, and I was the fourth grade AAU coach for the Albany City Rocks. Way tougher job. I can tell you that. But fun. It was awesome.
What is, I'd love to get your thoughts on AAU, because there's some people who think it's just great because you get playing time, and there's some people who are like, it's really not good because the kids aren't emotionally invested and there's so many games. They're not trained to care about winning as much, and there's so much travel involved. And where do you fall on the value of AAU ball?
I think AAU ball is misunderstood. You're right, Mike. A lot of people think of AAU basketball as a negative term and a horrible experience, and it's not. There are some really, really good people involved in AAU and very good coaches. Some have an agenda. They have their own agenda. And what makes that different than any other walk of life, any other area? So I think it's critical that they have an AAU experience where players from a particular area, and it's really important, I think, Mike, in Iowa, because otherwise these kids would be playing against the same 30 kids every weekend. Right. We have to go to Kansas City, Milwaukee, Chicago, New York, Dallas, LA. I think of where my boys have gone to play basketball and who they've played against. It's the only reason they're capable of playing in the Big Ten right now. The competition is tremendous. There's a lot of pressure. It can make or break you, but it also gives players who normally would not have had an opportunity to be seen and get a scholarship to be seen. I've always said, if Nicholas Baer grew up in New Jersey and played for a New Jersey AAU team, he would have had 50 offers.
Huh.
I asked him to come in my office. He had a couple Division II offers. I said, I need you to walk on. He said, Coach, I've always wanted to be a Hawk. A year later, he had scholarship here, and he was the sixth man of the year in the Big Ten, averaged double figures last year in the G League. But nobody recruited him because he didn't get AAU exposure the same way that a lot of other players do. So, all in all, I'm in favor of it. There are some individuals that shouldn't be doing it. I'm not going to mention their names, but they should not be coaching young people. But I will tell you that that's a smaller number than people think. I have great relationships with most AAU programs. Most AAU coaches have great respect for them. Occasionally you get angry because they have a personal agenda, maybe at the end of the recruiting process or even in the beginning of the recruiting process, but that's no different than some high school coaches you deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So it's more of their individual people who are problems than it is a systemic thing.
It's not systemic. Exactly.
Okay. Let me ask you a little bit about your rise in the coaching industry. So you have all these good jobs, Lehigh, UNC Greensboro, Siena. Oh, those are perfectly good jobs. But Iowa's different. The Big Ten is different. I want to know about the day that you get announced, because I remember when I got to ESPN, right? I was a little over my skis. You meet 400 people that day. I remembered 2 of their names because it's just so much at once. Yep. But there's not a lot of pressure on me outside of just doing the shows. Whereas with you, You're at that podium. There's the local media, there's national media, there's boosters, there's people in the athletic department, there's people academically that are there. Like, what kind of a whirlwind is that first day?
Well, I think the interesting thing about that, Mike, is what preceded that. When I first got the call that I was going to be one of 7 people interviewed, and then I flew to Atlanta to interview at the search firm, and I first met Gary Barta and Fred Mims, and I made it known that I wanted to be the Hawkeye coach. I done my homework. I coached in this building 2 occasions, and I don't want there to be any confusion that I wanted to be the coach of the Hawkeyes. And then there's a second round of interviews, then with President Mason, and then it's the emotion of telling my family that we're moving, because they didn't want to move. They didn't know anything but Siena, really. So that was emotional. We got in. We got to the airport. They sent a plane for my family. Connor locked himself in the car, wouldn't get on the plane. He didn't want to go. He was in 5th grade. And, Patrick was barely speaking to me. He was in 3rd grade. So you go through that. But then when I get there, I was really impressed, Mike, with the staff at Iowa. I sat down at a conference table with probably 8 or 9 people, one of which was Gary Barta, but sports information folks, fundraising people, going through what we were going to talk about at the press conference. And then what my day was going to look like after that, which is kind of what you were referring to. It was boom, 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 go here, meet with these folks, go there, fundraising people. So it was small group, Carver-Hawkeye Arena, 4,000 people. Then it was fundraising event, 400 people. And, I don't know that I was ever as exhausted as I was at the end of that day, but it was really more like a 10-day ordeal. But, you're kind of going on adrenaline because I'm thrilled, Mike, that I'm going to get a chance to coach in the Big Ten. I've been coaching a long time, had some success, finally have an opportunity. Finally, a Big Ten athletic director stood up at a press conference and said, this is our guy. He's going to lead the Hawkeye program. And I took great pride in that and took that very seriously and hired a great staff and consistently recruited good players, but even better people. And I think that's the important thing.
What's the over-under on hands you shook that first week? 3,000?
Yeah, I think you probably have to bet the over.
Yeah, I can't imagine the people whose names, like, I don't know if you watched Veep, but Julia Louis-Dreyfus is the main character, and Tony Hale would just whisper names into her ear because she couldn't possibly remember everyone. I don't know how you would remember, how any coach would do that in that first week or so.
Well, the last event of the day, like I said, was over at the foundation, and that was like a wedding receiving line. It felt like it was never going to end. And the critical thing is, I think, not to shake hands and then kind of blow people off. It's like they were there to meet the new coach, and if they wanted to have a 30-second conversation, we needed to. And then you're trying to remember. Hey, I sort of remember meeting you there. So I've had people come up and say, "Hey, I remember I met you the first day," and that would be hard for me to remember. But I wanted it to be meaningful for those hands that I did shake, or if they wanted to take a picture, they just wanted to wish me luck and welcome my family to Iowa, which is, I think, really one of the great things that happened to me and my family is how we were welcomed by the people here in this state. Where we're going to live. Like I told you, Connor didn't want to come, Patrick didn't want to come. Where are we going to live? Where am I going to go to school? What teams am I going to play on? The only schools and teams they knew were in Albany, New York.
Right.
And ironically, you probably heard this story. One of the first people that knocked on the door of the house that we were looking at that we eventually bought was Jack Nungy. He lived down the street. and Connor and he were palled around that day. And then he said, "Hey, by the way, when you get back here, we're moving to Indiana." will be gone. And they moved to Indiana, and we went down there and got them and brought them back. How about that? Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I hadn't heard that before.
Yep.
You mentioned something I wanted to get to with you, which is the building you call home, Carver-Hawkeye. There are a lot of great places in this conference. I mean, I would argue more than any other conference, and it's not really close. But there's something about that building, Fran, and I don't know if it's that you walk in and you're at the top of it and you got to go down to get in there, and that's unique, or maybe it's just a personal thing that I see it and I think of, early 90s Iowa basketball, and it makes me feel nostalgic or something. Like, I don't know what it is, but there's just something really special about that building.
It's interesting. On the wall, I have a picture of Lute Olson with a model of what Carver-Hawkeye was going to look like. And he signed it to me. So it's on the wall in my office. And I remember when I got this job, we were on the Nike trip together, and I asked him to play 18 holes. And I picked his brain about what it was like to be here. And he talked to me about Carver-Hawkeye. It was his idea. He wanted a pit. He played, or his teams played in the pit in Albuquerque. And he's like, well, that's what I want to build. And so that's why it's built that way, because of Lute Olson. And one of the things that really helped me, you talk about when I first got here, I was really lucky that our administration saw an absolute need, which was an improvement in our arena. And we've had actually 2 Carver-Hawkeye renovations since I've been here. But the first one, practice facility, 12,000 square foot weight room, new locker rooms, new offices, everything that you need. And so, like, when I was hired, there was a big hole right next to Carver-Hawkeye Arena. But the good news is the money was already raised, it was already approved, and it was under construction. So, the first year was a little bit crazy. We were in old offices on the other side of this building from where I'm sitting, and we went to lunch, and we came back, and the pipes flooded the whole office. Water was coming in through the ceiling. I mean, it was that kind of ordeal from the beginning. And then we spent the rest of that year, our offices were in the suites at the football stadium. So we park at the football stadium and go to work there. And then we dressed in a volleyball locker room in my first year. But then all of a sudden we moved into a spectacular facility, which was really a game changer for our program. To be able to bring a recruit in and say, look, handprint technology, get in here and shoot whenever you want, get in here and lift whenever you want, that kind of thing.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You did remind me of something else I wanted. You said you played 18 with Lute. Give me the best person you've golfed with.
Corey Pavin.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm not a very good golfer, Mike.
I know. Oh, I know. Woohoo!
No. So in the beginning, like you said, it's a spin. You're meeting people. I'm trying to figure out what players are here, who's going to stay, who do we need to recruit. And I get a phone call from Mark Jennings, one of our fundraising people, says, hey, we got to play golf on Thursday. So I figured we're going to go play golf with a prominent alumnus, perhaps, a potential donor. So we pull into the country club in Des Moines, and right away I'm like, all right, this is different. It was the principal golf outing, and I was playing in the Pro-Am. So I teed off. Corey Pavin, the coach of the Ryder Cup at the time, he was in my foursome.
Oh, man.
And so we had a huge gallery, huge. And, they now hitting is the Iowa Hawkeye coach. And, and I'm like telling guys, and you better move back. I mean, this thing might go right off the heel of my club and be injured. So we had more fun that day. And Corey Pavin, on about the 15th hole, he finally said, Coach, he said, I play with a lot of amateurs, and I make a point not to say anything, but I can't watch it anymore. He fixed my grip and he moved my feet. He said, just do these two things and you'll be okay.
Did it work?
Well, I was better.
Yeah.
The definition of did it work? I don't know. I mean, I'm still not very good, but I am better than I used to be after. But the great thing about him was afterwards, we went in and we had food together. He sat with us. It was funny. He called a couple of guys who were under consideration for the Ryder Cup were not doing what they were supposed to be doing, and he called them while I was walking with them down the fairway. He said, "This is either done." He said, "Watch this. I'm going to scare the crap out of these two." He said, "If you don't have this done by 4 o'clock, you will not be participating for the Ryder Cup team." And he hung up. He said, "Yeah, I think they'll be done within the next hour." He was laughing, and of course they called back. It's done. We got it. We finished. We did it. We were laughing. He had a great sense of humor. It was great with people. That was one of those. Okay, you played with a pro, and you played with an actor. We had the guy who was on the TV show Wings.
Oh,
he was hilarious. And then we had Terry Hatcher was in a group behind us, and they were bantering back and forth. It was a lot of fun.
That's cool.
But I told him, I said, "Don't ever put me in a pro-am again. I've never played in one again."
Right. I'm tired of having professional golfers say, "I've had it. I have to get."
Then the other thing, like a lot of times you hit that first shot, and as long as you don't kill anybody, okay. We had a gallery the whole day. Like we had a group of people follow us.
That's pressure.
Every shot was pressure.
Yeah.
I was smart enough to slow my swing down though. Just slow it down, nice and easy. Just punch it out there. And that's what I did.
Oh, that's great. All right, Fran, before we go, we're going to do before you go. These are 4 questions that are unrelated to anything whatsoever. Number 1, give me the recruit you almost had but didn't get that you still think about.
Jimmer Fredette, probably. Jimmer Fredette.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, when would that have been?
Whoa, that would have been I was at Siena 2004, I guess. Ooh. Yeah, Jimmer Fredette. I mean, there's been a lot. I mean, Tyler Eulis. Yeah. Of course, we got his brother.
Right. Yeah.
He was, 2 years later, he's the SEC Player of the Year. Kobe. He's a game changer. If Kobe comes, that's probably 10 wins.
Right.
Probably 10 wins there. But I mean, we could go around with that. And I think that the key is not to dwell on who you didn't get, but just try to get somebody good.
Right. All right, number 2, in or around the Iowa City area, give me your favorite thing to do or place to go that is not related to basketball.
Okay. Pretty much, Iowa City is a very tight-knit community. So we pretty much just spend time with friends, and we go to various restaurants. And one of the ones we like to go to is it's called Big Grove. And we're actually good friends with the owner and his wife. That's pretty much what we do. I mean, there are incredible bike trails. I'll ride around on those. But otherwise, I kind of keep to myself.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the answer I give when people say, "Why don't you have a social life?" I was like, I just keep to myself. It's not that friends, don't want to hang out with me. I just keep to myself. Number 3, what kind of kid were you in high school?
Pretty focused. I was a really hard worker academically. I had to work hard to get really good grades. I was very conscious of what my grades were. Like I wanted A's. I wasn't satisfied with C's. And I was at a particular school, LaSalle High School, arguably one of the top 5 academic high schools in the whole Philadelphia area. So there were a lot of smart people. So I had to work really hard and was considering Ivy League schools, and anything short of those grades, I wasn't getting in. Yeah. Obviously, eventually went to the University of Pennsylvania. But then it was hoops and school. It was, you know, it was an all boys school, so there wasn't a whole lot of shenanigans, social life, craziness. You know, I probably missed that part of it. I would have probably have liked to be at a school that was co-ed,
right,
in terms of social life and having more fun, but it probably enabled me to lock in more academically.
Yeah. Number 4, last time you cried at a movie.
Ooh. My wife tells me I don't cry at movies.
Yeah?
She cries. I mean, it doesn't take much to get her to cry.
Yeah.
At a movie. I don't remember if I did.
You're made of steel, McCaffery. That's all you are.
You know, I feel like I get emotional at movies like, you know, The Blind Side, or, you know, the first time I saw Rocky, parts of that, you know, even though it was sad at times, you know, I feel the emotion, but I don't know if I draw me to tears, because it's still a movie.
All right. Fair enough. You're a strong man. Listen, this is what, if you're good enough to get the nickname of Magic when you're a kid, I believe it. There's a core inside of you that is strong. Fran, thanks so much, man. It's always great talking to you. I appreciate it.
Always great talking with you, Mike. Really appreciate it.
So to recap, he's named after his grandfather. Back in the day, his nickname was White Magic. And if you ever go golfing with him and you like his stance, you can thank Corey Pavin. My thanks to Fran McCaffery for joining me. Heads up, our pal Alex Rue recently had our 2 youngest TV analysts, Kenny Bell and Joshua Perry, on his Take 10 podcast together. Be sure to check that out. That'll do it for this episode. From the Big Ten Network in Chicago, I'm Mike Hall. We'll see you next week.